Hey folks, everybody hear me okay? Alright, let's see. So, what's going on? We have, like somebody just mentioned in chat, we have Animesh out on all the RC channels. So that is still going well. We haven't run into any issues on the server side so far. There's not an RC viewer. We're still working on some bugs on the viewer side. So I think it's still going to be a bit more fiddling to get to an RC viewer, but we're continuing to work on it. Let's see. Yeah, Avastar's been updated to help with Animesh bugs. Yeah, that should be a big help. The change there is that the orientation is going to be X forward by default, so that it's not as easy to get into the situation where the uh, bind shape matrix is doing something squirrely that isn't being accounted for properly. I'll talk more about orientation issues later because I know it's a topic of perennial fascination, or at least something we can't escape. So, but let me run down the kind of overall situation first. Let's see. Meetings. We will be off for a couple of weeks. Next week I'll be out on vacation. The week after that we have an all hands company meeting that conflicts with it. So we'll be back on the whatever that is, the 19th of July. Let's see what else. Animesh issues. I got a ping from somebody about the Z offset issue. This is something where if you set a vertical offset to your mesh at the time of upload, that was getting respected by avatars but not by animeshes, and that should be fixed now. So if anybody's been having issues with that, let me know if it's not working for you. We're thinking that that is behaving correctly now. Let's see, other projects. Bixon Mesh has just been submitted to QA. Anchor has a bunch of bug fixes in the pipeline, including getting the local updates to work correctly. So when you're editing your appearance, you should see the right things even baked. So that's in QA now, and if that all passes, then there will be no project viewer in the distant future. And let's see, writer around, writer, no writer. Yes. Ryder says that we're getting close to a project viewer for EAP, so that'll be big news. Looking forward to take a look at. Posted on that one. Um, let's see. I think that's it for general updates. Oz, anything you want to chat about this week?
No, not really. Just came to hang out because I hadn't been here in a while.
Yeah, EAP viewer should be close to coming out. We should be having an EAP project viewer fairly soon.
Yeah, it should be usable on a DD in the next week or two, and on that is on all of a DD, and then another week or two after that, probably for Agni, assuming things go well.
Yeah, yeah. The EAP stuff is requires simulator changes as well, so it's only going to work in certain regions initially. Kind of similar to Animesh in that respect. Question about Bakes on Mesh headed for a project viewer. Does that mean you're not adding anything else to it? No, it doesn't. It's Bakes on Mesh is already a project viewer, so it's just going to be an updated project viewer with fixes for some of the bugs that aren't fixed now. That's not saying anything definite about what the final state of it's going to look like. Let's see. LSL support for Bakes on Mesh. Yeah, nothing new there. The last batch of work has been basically bug fixes, just getting UI to work correctly and display correctly, and so on. Not features. Let's see what else. Question on whether LODs for Warren Animesh will be tinkered with. Very likely, yeah. I have a whole bunch of LOD related things that I want to look at now that we have an accurate bounding box available. Mesh rigged avatars and meshes. Um, right now we have decent data about the bounding box extents, which means that we can do better calculations, but that doesn't mean that that's the data we're currently using for all our calculations. So it needs to be kind of reviewed case by case to see what's left to do there. Let's see. Is it possible to test eat parcel wind light on the beta grid without EM rights? Sorry, what are EM rights?
The state manager.
Okay.
I think what we have to do to test anything that involves land ownership on a DD is that we have to manually assign ownership of parcels. Ordinary land purchasing doesn't work right on a DD. Well, that's something we should probably think about trying to fix, but that's out. We don't want to burden the project with that. So when we get to that point, we'll probably be able to create a set of parcels that we can hand out. The parcel wind light does not require estate manager rights. It just requires partial ownership.
There was a comment about the bounding box of attached animeshes. That's correct. The math for that wasn't being done correctly, and I've got what I think is a fix for that in the pipeline now. So I think the next time the project viewer updates, you should see the fixes for that. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the issues you mentioned in that bug are related to the bounding box getting calculated incorrectly. That actually can cause all kind of weird behaviors. The threshold at which the LOD changes can be wrong, and you can also wind up with like the wrong extents if it tries to render as an imposter and various bad things. But there should be a fix for that on the way. Well, I would say the end is in sight for the projects, but I wouldn't say that they're so close to done that we're, desperately casting about for things to do. Don't really have any comments on what's coming next at this point, but yeah, looking forward to getting a chance to think about that once we get a few more issues wrapped up. Which one was something Ryder said he was working on for the future? Yeah, I thought there was work in progress on Godres in one of the repos. Oz, do you know what the story is on that?
It's in there.
It's in EAP.
Yeah. It.
Cool.
In fact, I think I saw a commit go in just the other day that actually implemented the first version. And they're called crepuscular rays. We use the secular name.
Is that like separation of shaders and state or something?
Yeah, exactly.
So what will Bakes on Mesh and Animesh mean for somewhat normal Second Life players? I like that term. Well, we really don't know yet. I mean, it's a new technology, or two new technologies that we're in the process of implementing and getting the bugs out of. Once it's out in the wild, is really when we find out what people are going to do with it. We often have our own theories about how things are going to get used, but we're always amazed at the ingenuity of our users once they actually get a hold of things, and they always come up with things that we never anticipated. Right. I think it just depends on people's creativity. Particularly with Bakes on Mesh, where there's a large existing content base out there already for ways of creating and managing mesh avatars and applier systems and so on. And even for Bakes on Mesh itself, it's not definitely decided exactly what the final feature set is going to be. We have various requests that are still under consideration. So once you get the final feature set, and then the people who have been doing content using other techniques for many years start picking it up and seeing how they want to use it, then I think you're going to see the emergence of various kind of standards for uh, managing avatars that are mesh avatars that are baked based or partly baked based, and it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. But I certainly wouldn't venture to predict exactly what's going to happen at this point.
There was a question that went by about how the crepuscular rays are implemented. They're actually implemented as an atmospheric effect. So you're basically describing how much scattering there is in the air because that's what produces that effect. So it's not a separate object the way people do them now. Instead, it will just be an effect created by light as it moves through the air. Which means it will always point in the right direction. And in fact, we have new versions. We have the new LSL functions that will become available with EAP that will point correctly towards, that will give you the direction to point correctly towards the sun and the moon as they are represented in by wind light, which currently the current LSL functions for finding the time of day that people use for that don't do that. They're not wind light sensitive, but now they will be. Right, same as shadows. So you will be able to make working sundials. In fact, we have working sundials.
Portable Stonehenge you can wear on your wrist.
I don't I don't know how walls will interact with that effect. It's a good question, but I don't know the answer. No precipitation. I don't think we'll be modifying anything at this point as part of this project about how light and walls interact. Uh, Unless Graham is getting trickier than I am aware of.
Yeah, that's always a challenge to try to change the behavior of anything that's already out there. Usually can't do it. About 3 new data points for LL particle system parameters. Oz, I'm pretty sure we've discussed this before, probably when you were around. That one's accepted and just looking for a home, isn't it?
Sorry, which? What was the question?
This is a question about bug 214757 linked above, which is the adding new parameters for particle systems.
Yeah, we imported that one. We haven't done anything on it yet.
Unfortunately, the supply of good ideas exceeds the supply of development hours.
Yeah, that's that's one I would have liked to have had. So yeah, that's uh, that's some. The hardest part of that one is the viewer side because that's where the particle stuff actually happens. If you're interested in accelerating that one, Tyrell, then uh, find a third-party viewer dev who will will dummy up the support in the viewer, and then we'll be able to do the server side relatively easily.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're always happy to look at open source contributions. Animeshes show info the same way as avatars do when animation info is turned on, but seems to show different info than LL get object animations. What difference are you seeing on those? That could be a bug, or it could just be that the animation info text doesn't get updated super frequently. I think sometimes you have to, you know, zoom in or out or do something else to trigger an update to the debug text. So it may just be it's lagging the state, or there could be some other issue. But if you want to post a Jira on that, we'd be happy to take a look at it. At least theoretically, I would expect those two to be consistent. Great, thanks. Get length of an animation in seconds. Yeah, that's the
What
sort
was
of
that?
thing that. Sorry, go ahead. Somebody else was talking.
No, I'm just replying to what Veer said. What the heck is he talking about? Or Oz, I mean. What Oz said.
Uh, yeah, it's basically an in-world animation editor. So you can the first version will just be useful for creating poses, but uh, eventually we hope to extend it into creating full animation sequences.
Yeah, if you can create a bunch of poses and string them together.
Right.
Wouldn't stringing a bunch of poses all together instead of making one animation be a bit resource intensive?
It,
Well, the idea would be that the output would be an animation.
Okay.
You work with the poser and then ultimately generate a an animation that can be uploaded.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, about it, yeah, about animation length. There's a limit. There's a bit of a limitation on the server side in that currently the simulator doesn't really know anything about animations. It doesn't ever, as far as I know, it doesn't ever actually, read the contents of animations or parse the contents to figure out, joints they affect or how long they are or any of that stuff. So, it's not that that couldn't be done, but it would be it'd be a decent sized chunk of work. It might have performance implications on the back end. So, that's the sort of thing that if we had some, compelling reason to do that, then a bunch of other things would become easy, like, like adding an LSL function to get it. But until we added that kind of capability, kind of a lift there, a decent amount of work to get to the point where. Right now we do some analysis of animations at upload time. So there's some code that looks at things when they're first uploaded, but when you're just requesting animations and saying, hey, run this particular thing, the simulator doesn't really know anything about the animation other than just its inventory ID or its asset ID. Just passes that along to the viewer. So, I mean, the bottom line is we probably wouldn't, go to the work of adding animation parsing to the simulator, just to support this LSL function. But if there was some, kind of high importance, high profile thing where we needed to do it anyway, then it would be kind of easy for this to ride along with that work. Yeah, if there was a big animation overhaul going on for some other reason, for example. Changing the priority, yeah, that one also sounds good.
And speed. Vera, I was just talking to Gaia because I had a problem because the Second Life viewer is denying babies their pacifiers and bottles.
Oh no.
Okay, purposely too. It's
Crying
not
babies everywhere. This is terrible. What's the
right.
problem?
But it seems like Gaia told me I have to use the Firestorm viewer to upload an attachment that's rigged to attachment or mesh that's rigged
that shouldn't be a limitation today. I mean, there were a couple of different issues. At one point, we didn't support rigging to attachment points at all, and then there was a period where you could do it, but it wouldn't know what to do with ones that had spaces in the names. I think the only thing you would have to do to get it to work now is just to make sure that your joint names have like an underscore instead of a space.
Well, essentially, Gaia told me that I have to use the Firestone viewer because something didn't get parsed over to the Second Life viewer.
Yeah, that's about the underscore versus space thing. But yeah, we've as far as I know, we've fixed that in the Animesh viewer. If you have an animation that that won't upload, or not I mean a mesh.
Viewer. In the Animesh viewer, I did not try it in the Animesh viewer.
I don't remember. It might have been a fix we did back in the Bento days, actually. But in any case, yeah, try it with Animesh. If that doesn't work, then drop me a line. I'm sure we can get it work.
Because babies need pacifiers.
An unpacified baby is a scary thing. Okay, Beck says the fix is probably already in Animesh.
I thought something was up because we have our cat uses the same thing for its catnip. So, and that seems to work, but I didn't know. Yeah, I must have not been using an Animesh viewer.
Yeah, so we're definitely not trying to stop people from rigging to attachments. Although, of course, in the Bento days, the hope was that if we've got all of those joints newly added, we don't have to rig to attachment points. My personal feeling is that rigging to attachment points isn't ideal because it makes it hard to use the attachment points as an attachment point. But I guess if Animesh objects don't support attachments anyway, then maybe it's not so much of an issue.
Well, I completely agree with you. But in these particular cases, it's just way more handier to use the attachment point, and I always know where it's going to be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it should definitely be possible to do that. So give it a shot and let me know. Let's see. Policy wants to talk about rotation nonsense. Yeah. So I got the patch from you guys, and had to tweak the logic just a little bit to get it to work for arbitrary meshes. But if you put that in, it does seem to cause the rotation for the avatar to line up correctly with the orientation of the like the physics shape of the corresponding mesh object if if a mesh object is the root of the link set, and if your other rig meshes are also consistent with that. Of course, it's only direction, so just get whatever's in the root. So that's there's still a question of what the correct behavior actually is. The problem with doing that is that it means that if you have a rigged mesh as the root, then the object you create is going to be oriented that way. So like if you say that I made a bunch of Animesh, I had a bunch of meshes that had been uploaded from different viewers, right? So there's one from Blender that's facing in the -y direction, and there's one that's used the latest version of Avastar that's facing in the +x direction. There's one that's using else that's facing some way. So if I resed, all of those meshes at the same time, they would be facing in different directions, right? If I tried to run a script that to get them to walk forward and turn 90 degrees and walk forward again, then some of them would walk forward and some of them would walk sideways, right? It wouldn't be consistent because they don't have a common frame of reference for which way they want to be oriented. Um, my concern is that it seems like maybe we actually want there to be a consistent frame of reference, that it makes more sense to say, avatars are plus X oriented, and um, ideally stuff gets created in that format, but if not, it kind of gets twisted around that way on animation. So that gives you more consistent behavior with something like scripts, but on the other hand, it doesn't address the concern about the physics shapes being out of whack, which is not a great look. So it's still a little I'm talking right now, so I'm not keeping track of what's going on in chat. I see there's a bunch of stuff rolling by. So that's kind of the concern. I think that the fix makes a certain kind of sense, but I'm not positive that it's what we want to do. And if you do have a root object that's not a mesh, then that's another can of worms too, right? In that case, there isn't a bind shape in the root to orient to, in which case you still wind up with the same kinds of alignment issues, but you wind up with consistent orientation at kind of at scripting time. So no definite decision on that yet, but I do appreciate the submission, and I have done some testing on it. I think I think it can be made to work as advertised with minor tweaks. Okay, scrolling back. That's how things are today, pre-Animesh. Yeah, I mean the orientation issue for meshes has kind of always been hiding away in a sense, but it wasn't very visible because the rigged meshes were only displayed on existing avatars, and they were only ever non-physical. So if the physics was in the wrong place, you really couldn't tell. And if the orientation was inconsistent with the way it showed on the avatar, then it didn't really matter because you never displayed it by itself anyway.
Actually, I was working with Gaia last week about that problem, the physics shapes being turned 90 degrees. That turns out to be a Blender issue, not a Maya. Maya DAEs have no problem. But DAEs created from Avastar do have that problem. And so Gaia's working on it right now to hopefully fix it in Avastar moving forward. But Aki had a great, because Aki we were working, all three of us were working on it together. And Aki had a great idea of adding in the edit window that you could click on, say, an Animesh, and have an option of a little box that you can click, because to turn the Animesh 90 degrees facing X, to fix old DAEs that were uploaded previously, and because they're all rotated the exact same way, 90 degrees.
So
I think
that's
in Z.
So you mentioned that there's a fix. What level is that getting applied at? Is that during upload, or like when you're editing the object after it's already resed?
Oh, it would be after it's when you res it. You right mouse click on it and you click edit, and then you go into probably like the features tab. That it would be where if this is an Animesh, you have a little check mark to turn it 90 degrees. In the negative 90 degrees, I believe it is in the Z axis. That would be for anything that was uploaded before Gaia fixes it. So it's definitely a Blender or Avastar issue. Maya does not have this problem.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Let's see. Beck has some comments about LL Lookat on pathfinding. Documents the correct approach. Okay, I'll take a look at that. Editing a feature to change object orientation would be nice. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole can of worms associated with this. If you think about like the arbitrary case where you got a bunch of different rigged meshes that were created in different coordinate frames, and you link them together, they'll kind of all look right on your Animesh skeleton, but yet they could have strewn physics shapes halfway across the landscape, and their sort of static locations could be nowhere near each other. Obviously that's not good modeling practice. You wouldn't normally want to do it that way, but you could argue that we should be doing something about that kind of case too. In which case, it seems like you would, at least for some of those objects, you would have to be making them line up to the skeleton rather than making the skeleton line up to them, because there's only one skeleton and a bunch of different primitives, basically different rigged meshes that are all kind of cooperating together.
Can I respond to what Elizabeth is saying?
Oh, sure.
Okay. What Elizabeth is saying is she's saying that it depends in any program that can export out a DAE if the skeleton is facing not X and the it exports out would have this issue. So yeah, I agree with what she's saying, that because of Avastar, the way the skeleton is set up is it's not facing the same way as it does in Second Life. So when it's getting exported out, that's what's causing the issue. So it's not a Blender issue per se, it's how Avastar is set up. Now, I don't know if Blender has the capability of setting up the skeleton to export out properly. I don't know Blender that well. But we still would need a legacy fix for older DAEs that were uploaded previous to whatever Gaia can do in Blender to get the correct skeleton orientation. So I understand what Elizabeth is saying, but what I was saying is not necessarily incorrect. This is a Blender DAE problem issue from Avastar that Maya, if it does not have this problem, if the skeleton is set up correctly, which is Z is up, X is forward, and Y is left and right.
Well, I'll just say that Blender, when you export, whether it's FBX or almost any format, you can change the complete orientation of the rig or the mesh. What Gaia and Avastar is doing is they're kind of doing everything for us, and it works. But obviously, I don't know exactly what the issue is with the rotation, but they're doing it for us. But Blender does have those options.
Yeah, I mean, Beck is right that this is an issue with the way that the bind shape matrix gets handled or not handled in the viewer. Excuse me. But given that we've historically had this limitation, the question is, what's the right thing to do moving forward? I think if future content, is normally set up in a plus X direction, so that the need to use the bind shape, then that's that's great, but there's still a lot of stuff out there that's kind of doing its thing in a different way, and we have to decide what the right way to approach that is. Another thing that we've talked about recently is that I think part of this is an uploader issue. The mesh uploader is it has some issues, and one thing it doesn't do is to help you know when you're uploading something that has these kinds of orientation issues. So at the very least, we should be giving people feedback about it and saying, hey, it's something to be aware of. And in a more perfect world, we would actually give them the option to fix it at upload time as well.
You can actually see the problem in the upload in the preview window. Where you can select the physics shape or skin weights. If you pop back and forth between those two, you can actually see the avatar turn 90 degrees. If there's a problem, if there's no problem, in the preview window, the mesh will stay facing the correct way. So you can actually see if there's an issue.
Oh, that's a good point. Let's see, we had a comment about the limit of a single worn Animesh. Let's see, people can still pile linked Animeshes into one attachment. They can, but it's really different because if you have a bunch of different rigged meshes that are all part of the same Animesh attachment, then they're all going to share a single skeleton, right? They're all gonna animate together, and they're all gonna have a common shape, in the sense that if the meshes cause any turn your avatar into into a dog shape or something, then or turn the Animesh avatar into a dog shape or something, then basically all of those meshes are going to be shaped like a dog. So people can do that, but if the effect they're shooting for is to have multiple independent skeletons, then at least for now that wouldn't, because you've got the single skeleton limit. We will continue to assess limits. We've always tried to raise things when we thought we could afford it, but I think at least for the initial release, we'll be going with the one Animesh attachment and see how things shake out. Also, I'm always curious to hear about use cases. What do people envision doing with multiple Animesh attachments, and what limit would they need to make that work?
Do you really want to know?
Yeah, feel free to clean it up for me if you like, but just in particular, how many do they think they need? If it's say one is not enough. If I hear that people need 3, that's more specific than hearing that one is not enough, whatever the number is.
Well, of course, Zubies want you to be able to wear 2 babies. But personally, I'm weary about giving people more than one.
How many babies is too many babies? This is not a question we've had to address before. So, and yeah, why is there a limit at all? It's a performance thing, you know, having attachments that have their own skeletons is more expensive than, you know, having attachments that don't have their own skeletons, other things being equal. And also because attachments don't have don't have a land impact associated with them, there isn't sort of that additional mechanism to, you know, discourage a lot of complexity. So, you know, I'm confident that if we set the limit to be 50, there would be somebody who would have, you know, 5 little dancing skeletons on each finger, and you know, so I'm pretty sure there has to be a limit. Whether the limit ultimately should be 1, harder to say. As I say, we will continue to assess that. Yeah, well, I mean, you couldn't really have 10 different animeshes that use all those bones. You know, you would have to make a single animesh. That is, you'd have to link together all of the all of the rig meshes into one animesh object before you could set it as an attachment. So, I mean, that would be subject to the usual limits of animeshes in terms of triangle counts and that sort of thing. But it would work as long as you're happy with the behavior that they share a common skeleton and.
And you can only use 110 bones, not 150.
Oh well, I think it's 110 per mesh, right? So you actually could, you could link together multiple rigged meshes that used different bones, and the combined critter could use 159 or whatever, as long as no single mesh used more than 110.
My point is really, I don't see what the limit saves us from. People who want to abuse it and cause grief are going to abuse it and cause grief. A single attachment limit, to me, is just ridiculous. It's a limitation that is certainly disappointing to anyone that plans to use Animesh attachments for more than just carrying a baby around or having their puppy follow them, or for driving around on a motorcycle. Those 3 examples are the only ones that are well suited to a single Animesh attachment limit.
Please give us more examples of something that would be great with multiple.
Okay, as somebody else mentioned, being able to create an Animesh male genitalia would be a nice bonus. But if anybody wants to be able to use any other application of Animesh, then that's out. I'd like to be able to make other Animesh attachments. The truth of the matter is that while it seems that most of you feel we're well served by what's available on the bento skeleton, I get requests for the last, 10 years now for stuff that people would like to see regular attachments do, like wings. And the bones that are in the wings will not do the kinds of things that people have been asking for 10 years. So I'd like to be able to create my own wing mesh rig and create Animesh wings. But again, if they want to be able to wear the rings and carry their baby around, they can't, because a single Animesh attachment limit is ridiculous.
Okay, so I'm curious about the having sort of body parts, wings or genitalia or whatever. Why do those need to be animeshes as opposed to using the skeleton of the original avatar? What issues do you run into there?
Well, let's just use wings as an example. Bento wings are nice, and it's great that we have bones for those now, but there are not sufficient bones in the bento wings to be able to do a lot of the kinds of emotes that people have requested. A simple wing hug is one. It's very difficult to use the limited bones that are available for the wings to do a convincing wing hug. That's just one example. Personally, I'd like to be able to take my Osiris male genitalia and make it Animesh. A single bento bone is, first of all, it's completely useless for that. And second of all, you also can't states that way. All you can do is change the angle on something.
I mean, I know people have done modifications to the rig. It's more work, but if you if you're willing to munge around on the various bones in the skeleton, you can repurpose existing joints.
You certainly can, but you can't. What am I trying to say here? The bento isn't going to work for all of the applications. Not if somebody is trying to use two different types of creations that borrow bones from two different creators. You could wind up with all kinds of headaches there. But more to the point, I don't get this single Animesh limit because it's not really saving us anything. I mean, in Animesh, you say another bento skeleton to work with, so I can reorganize those however I want, and that's great. But then you're going to limit it to one attachment per avatar, so that means that the end user winds up having to pick the single Animesh attachment that they want to wear, and they can't wear any other one at the same time. They couldn't even, for example, ride around in their vehicle with their pet if they're both Animesh.
Let me just provide some perspective on why we're rolling this out with that limit in place. And it's basically two rules that we've found are really important. The first one I have come to call Simon's rule because he quotes it a lot, which is everything should have a limit. We have long since found that anything we put into Second Life, any feature of Second Life that we implement that does not have a limit, somebody finds a way to abuse it such that it damages the experience of everyone else. So everything has to have a limit.
I have no argument with that. I just think a limit of one is too little.
Right. The second rule is it's much easier to raise limits than it is to lower them. We have successfully lowered some limits that were problems before, but we always end up damaging something if we do that. And that's a scary thing that we try to avoid. So
I am completely on board with the idea of launching with only one limit if there's going to be serious consideration to raising it later. The problem that I'm having right here in this moment that's really aggravating me is there are people in the community sitting right here in these chairs that are saying that what I'm asking for is ridiculous. And to me, that is because they just don't care about the applications that I'm talking about. Just like they don't care if Bakes on Mesh launches without Applier support because they don't understand the impact that it's going to have on the Applier market. There is a very narrow-minded, tunnel vision view here that I am getting very frustrated with seeing repeated. I get it if you don't care about this or you don't care about that. I just don't think that it benefits any of us to come in here and limit beyond reason the potential imagination of the Second Life creator and user. Now, as far as right now, sure, I agree. That's fine, Tier, and that's fine, Elizabeth. But some of you people pop off with, there's limits for a reason, and, why would you want to do that and do that a different way instead? And, that I didn't come here prepared to have a full-fledged debate on whether or not there should ever be multiple Animesh attachments, or trust me, I could cite probably 100 different examples of stuff that my customers have requested over the last decade. All I'm saying, and the only reason I keep bringing it up, is I want to make sure that the Lindens are aware that at least within my market, there is an interest in seeing more than one Animesh attachment able to be worn in the long term.
Yeah.
and now
No,
set up.
we're definitely aware of that, and we do take the fact that there are different use cases seriously. We don't assume that everyone is trying to use the features in the same way.
Yeah,
So
I think our interest is in going slowly enough that we don't create a problem we'll then have to try and walk back. And uh, we're always looking for ways. I mean, the history of this user group is a history of our finding ways to extend and add to what was not there before. Um, and we're going to try to keep doing that, but we just want to make sure that we don't go faster than our technology and our ability to manage it is capable of.
That's cool, and I appreciate what's being done now. I'm actually very excited about all of the stuff that you guys are bringing to Second Life that's new. What I'm not excited about is seeing Elizabeth go, that's ridiculous, and comparing it to people in 4 million triangle meshes. It's not the same thing at all, and that argument is completely useless.
we should probably wrap it up for today. We're a little past time. So back and Polysale, I know we didn't resolve all the questions about orientation and positioning. And we are actually looking into it, and I think we'll probably be having some continuing discussions on this through other channels, since we're not going to have meetings for the next couple of weeks. But anyway, we'll continue to look into that and see what seems to make sense. But yeah, anyway, looking forward to seeing what people can do with this once we can get it out onto the full grid and into release, and we'll keep pushing that direction. Right, thanks all.
Sorry, can you
Thanks,
hear me?
Fear.
Okay. Excellent.
Thanks, Veer.
If I may, Galathea, I think you're mistaken in your understanding that we're telling you can't just because we're not interested in the things that you're wanting to do. I actually fully expect that there will be Animesh wings because in the bento process, I personally fought for more wings in the wing bones, but in order to get a truly realistic feather wing fold, you need to have a bone for every single feather of the wing, and that's just not a practical thing to add that many bones to the avatar, But now with Animesh, it can be a practical thing because now you can literally double the number of bones on the avatar and put that all into really cool, complicated, detailed feather wings if you want to. And it's really cool that we have that ability. But to do that for every little part of the avatar, like for instance,
I'm not asking for every little part, though.
Let me talk, please. For instance, you were saying for genitalia, to take 159 bones and stick it down there.
Who's talking about 159 bones? I'm not talking about 159 bones.
Every single Animesh, though, does add 159 bones. That's what we're trying to explain to you. So a lot of the users here, we by and large tend to be more professional and have a better understanding of.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm not interested anymore with your inferred insults. You can go ahead and share your opinion with whoever you want, but I'm out of here. You have a nice day.
I'm trying to explain. So, okay, well, he's gone. I tried.
What an idiot.
I was gonna tell him you could use the hind bones work pretty well with.
Well, I was going to mention that most creators have used tail and have used hind bones to get around that, and that we are